So thanks everybody for joining this month's Office Cloud Hours. I thought I'd get cute with a title and call it to SPE or not to SPE. There's a little bit of detail in the newsletter that you probably received on the topic, and we're going to drill down a little bit deeper into that as we go. This is our second one of these. The first one's pretty well attended, and I expect a few more to join on this one as well. This is part of your benefit of being a You Already Own It customer. So just in general, the SPE overview, roughly 25 to 30 minutes, and then we'll open up the mic to questions, figuring probably the first wave of questions are probably about the topic, but everything is fair game, and so we'll shift to any other cloud-related strategy conversation questions. We're happy to do. If they get too deep in the weeds, we'll set aside some time to talk to you offline if we feel like we can't answer the question on sort of this open forum. So welcome, everyone. Hopefully it's sunny and warm where you are, but if not, hopefully it'll be that way soon. So I thought I'd introduce your You Already Own It team. Steve Winter is our Vice President of state and local as well as commercial business and education as well. Myself, I'm Bob Ballard. I'm the Principal Cloud Strategist here at Planet across all the verticals. We have Jerry Martin, who's also a Cloud Strategist, and a critical member of the You Already Own It team, as well as we have Mary Tucker, who is probably who you saw your invitation come from. She keeps us all in line and makes sure that we're delivering all the content appropriately and on schedule to you guys. So everybody, thanks for joining. So I wanted to start off with a key member. So don't forget, as a You Already Own It customer, you have the benefit of being able to email the You Already Own It at goplanet.com alias with any questions or concerns that you might have. That gets delivered to the team, Jerry and I, and if we feel like we need to reach out to one of our subject matter experts to help you, we will. And we promise that we'll respond within 24 hours and hopefully get you an answer by then, but if not, get you an answer within a day or so of that for sure. So please feel free to use that as part of your benefits. I think it's something that can help you guys along. So the key topic to kick things off today is to SPE or not to SPE. So when I say SPE, I mean Secure Productive Enterprise, which is the new nomenclature that Microsoft has given what they call their hero SKUs, which is their all-encompassing licensing SKUs for Office 365. Where we are today. So some folks might have heard something called the Enterprise Cloud Suite or ECS, because we know how much Microsoft loves acronyms, three-letter acronyms. As a former Microsoftie, Jerry and I both are. There's actually an internal site at Microsoft that just lists what all those acronyms mean, so I will try not to use them as much as I can, but it is very difficult to say Secure Productive Enterprise 1,000 times in this conversation. So for that one in particular, I will call it SPE or SPE. There's two flavors, and we're going to drill into these, but, so the Enterprise Cloud Suite, which aligns pretty closely to what the Secure Productive Enterprise E3 is, that's been retired and been replaced by the Secure Productive Enterprise, or SPE 3, right? And that includes your Office 360 Enterprise E3, and obviously if you're government, that's the government version of that. It includes Enterprise, Mobility, plus Security, the first level or E3 version of that as well. We're going to talk specifically about what comes in all of those, etc. as well, and what some of the big benefits are. Again, trying to keep this to 25 or 30 minutes. This presentation could be 2 hours, but just hit some key highlights and some things to consider before we open up to more questions. And then I think a big part of this, which was really important and confusing in some of the classic or old versions of how Microsoft was doing licensing in the cloud, they do include Windows 10 Enterprise as well. There's a couple flavors of that. And then we sort of step up to, how do I buy the thing that gets me everything, right? And we're going to focus on what some of those things are in this conversation. And that's the SPE 5, right? And includes the highest level of Office 365, the highest level of enterprise mobility and security, and the stepped up version of Windows 10 Enterprise as well, which has some really cool tie-ins that we'll talk a little bit about. So This is a little bit of a busy slide, but I thought we're going to make this presentation available to everyone as well as a follow-up. So I thought I'd just include, this came from an internal education slide at Microsoft, and I thought it does a really good job of sort of demonstrating what is included, right? So as we see when we start, the big pieces that are made up of the three major components of the secure productive enterprise are, your Office suite, the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite, and then Windows 10 Enterprise as well. And so they step up with the two. A couple of the key differentiations here, obviously on the Office side, right, a couple of the big differences are Power BI and analytics. There's some pretty powerful things in there, and some that are particularly worth noting, as well as the ability to do PSTN conferencing and cloud PBX. So for instance, you guys are joining this Skype for Business session today on an SPE 5 SKU and an Office E5 SKU, so that I can have the integrated PSTN conferencing number and bridge and cloud PBX stuff. In my role at Planet Technologies, I'm a mobile employee, and I get a fully functioning featured telephone extension delivered directly to my desktop. So those are some of the big things that come with stepping up to the E5 version of Office. And then we start looking at what are some of the key pieces that come with Windows 10 Enterprise as well. We're going to talk about this a little bit, but some integration with information protection, etc., that come in. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then with EMS, we get advanced threat analytics. We get the sort of first level version of Azure Information Protection. We get some of the advanced threat protection. And then when we step up to, my slide is hidden, unfortunately. We step up, we get some of the advanced layers as well with security and compliance. I think it's probably easier to see this information on the EMS in my next slide. So when we talk about EM plus S. So that's another area of confusion that I want to help clear up. So Microsoft used to have the product called Enterprise Mobility Suite. It's now called Enterprise Mobility and Security, as they've really sort of used this as the place to deliver their up-level security features that are cloud-based, right? So as we start to look through this, right, we get Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1 with the first level, or the E3 level. We get the Windows Server Client Access CAL in both of those as well. We get Microsoft Intune in both versions of that product. We get Azure Information Protection Plan 1, which is encryption for all files in storage locations and cloud-based file tracking. And then when we step up to the next level, right, we add on some of the intelligent classifications and encryptions, which go all the way down to the Windows OS level. So we have this idea of data classification that we can extend not only for information in the cloud, but as those files get classified, they get extended to the client level as well. We also get Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics. And then when we look at the higher premium versions, we layer on Cloud App Security, which is some advanced identity management capabilities for third-party applications integrations and your own application integration, on-premise applications as well, right? So I can layer on the concept of having a unified identity for all cloud properties and have advanced analytics on some of those things as well. And then when we get to the one thing I think I skipped over when I went through is when we look at the higher functioning levels for the E5 version, we start adding Azure Active Directory Premium, which allows you to do things like risk-based conditional access, right? So we have support for conditional access based on location and some other things when we're looking at the beginning layer, we start having the concept of understanding what your roles are in the organization, and do I apply, additional conditions based on those, right? So the examples of, if I have, can I say, well, if you're logging on as an administrator, I apply these conditions. If you're logging on as a regular user, I apply those conditions, a different set of conditions. And those tie into the whole idea of privileged identity management. And I've got actually a pretty cool screenshot of some of the things that you see about this. Again, this notion of a second level of security and scrutiny and analytics based on higher privileged users, which, your security teams can thoroughly, will definitely have some interest in. There's a bunch of products out there that, if you layer them all together, bring some of this stuff to your environment, but the level of integration and some of that story is particularly, cogent here in the Microsoft platform, right? So, and then obviously, in the stepped up versions, you get all of everything that comes in the previous version. So, just kind of talking about what these pieces are, right? So, I think we all have an understanding in general, right, of what Office 365 is all about, right, with the, the authoring of documents and mail and social and some of those things, and site content management around, interacting with those documents. So if we look at the first 3.5 of these on the slide, right, we start saying, okay, those come in the E3 level, right? So we get some level of Skype interaction. We can have Skype meetings, we can have IM in presence, and we can have, multi-party video, et cetera, but we don't have any integration with PBX, whether that be on-premise or in a PBX replacement scenario, and we don't have the Skype PSTN conferencing integration as well, which I think in many organizations provides a challenge. If you're not using a third-party conferencing service that has an integration story with Skype Online, attending these meetings with some folks attending via phone and some folks attending via the built-in sort of VoIP through their PCs or Macs or whatever, it really degrades the experience, and so there's a huge value there. And then the final piece that comes with sort of the stepped-up version of Office is the analytics piece, right? And, that's a cool buzzword these days, and we all love to throw it around, but the capabilities of Power BI, which has many of the features and functionality of some of the high-end solutions like Tableau, et cetera, and while it's not free and we can all argue about the term what inexpensive means, it's really geared to be delivered at at most of your users versus just a select few, right? So we're not talking about something that's $300 and $400 and $500, $1,000 a seat, which some of these higher end business analytics, business intelligence capabilities often are charged when you buy them through other services. This is, analytics for the masses. And then also Delve Analytics, which is pretty powerful and from both an enterprise perspective as well as a personal information management perspective, right? So if you guys have never seen what Delve Analytics can do, just from a personal level, so if you think about what Delve does, Delve uses, is a combination of sort of Microsoft search technology and machine learning to bubble up content for you, right? But Delve Analytics takes that same machine learning that it uses to bubble up the proper content by looking who you interact with, et cetera, and then gives you analytics and metrics on those interactions for you. So the story I'll say is, so I'm an E5 customer every day at Planet, jokingly. So Steve Winter was my vice president. When we first turned on Delve Analytics, it came back and, it lists how long it takes you to respond to certain people from email and how long those people take to respond to you, how much time you spend in email, how much of your time are spent in meetings, etc. So my funny story really quickly that I love to convey when I talk about this is, our vice president, Steve Winter, when we first got it, I found that it took a day and a half for him to respond to email to me, which of course I screenshotted and sent to him and put smiley faces on. By the way, if you look at, it had the intended consequence, because if you look at what his response time now, it's just a couple of hours, right? So there's some very powerful personal information management elements. But then from an enterprise perspective, right, we can aggregate this stuff and look at it from an enterprise perspective to see what are our people doing? Are they productive? How much time are we spending in meetings? Is that something we should review? All of that kind of stuff. So that's sort of an overview of where the pieces fit from an Office perspective. From the the enterprise mobility plus security, right? We like to look at this as sort of four categories: identity and access management, managed mobile productivity, information protection, and then identity-driven security, right? And I have a whole hour-long presentation on what that identity-driven security means, but to try to boil it down into the quick synopsis is this notion of, people bring access to multiple applications, some of them in your infrastructure, some of them not. They have so many different devices, etc. So let's sort of manage their access and security in a user-centric way, as opposed to a device-centric way or an application-centric way. And so that's sort of the idea behind it. So if we layer out the SPE3 view of this, right, we get Azure Active Directory Premium version 1 for identity and access management. We have Microsoft Intune to do the managed productivity, mobile productivity. We start to look at Azure Information Protection Premium, Plan 1. We're going to talk a little bit about that more. And then Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics for identity-driven security, and it layers on the capabilities of things like using, again, the machine learning platform available to the Microsoft Cloud infrastructure to do things around analyzing anomalies in your environment. So the Plan 1 stuff starts to look at things like, hey, did I have a user log in what is an unrealistic time difference between two dispersed geographies, right? So this actually, I just saw a perfect example of this. I was at a customer, a university in the mid-Atlantic / South, we'll say, and they actually had, they got an alert that said, hey, somebody logged in 25 minutes apart from Europe and here in our local location, right? So it recognized that, sent an alert. It turns out that it was the security guy testing what happens if somebody tries to log into Office 365 through the Tor browser, which had routed itself through Sweden or something like that. But as an example, it immediately kicked off a result. The planning team got notified because we're in an active migration there, et cetera, that there could be a security violation. So as we look at sort of the next layer, when we step up to SPE5, right, we add on some of the Azure Active Directory Premium 2 elements, which brings secondary, additional capabilities along the way. We start to talk about Azure Information Protection Premium 2 and its integration with data classification, which I have a little bit of a screenshot. I'll talk a little bit more about in a second. But the idea of, so we think about information rights management, which we talked about a lot, right? That's sort of what comes with Information Protection Plan 1. We take that to the next level and take information rights protection and start including the built-in Windows and server/client data classification elements and take those into the cloud, so that if I classify a document, whether it's saved in a cloud location, saved on a local file share, et cetera, I can maintain those data classifications and rules, including things like saying you can't save content here locally. It must be stored in these particular cloud locations, et cetera. So the feature set for that is growing. The idea, though, is first and foremost, let's manage and maintain this notion of true data classification on a security scale, and then we can start integrating in features within things like DLP, et cetera, that can take advantage of that level of data classification. So even if I classify a document stored on a local file share because I've turned on data classification services in Windows, it can recognize that and automatically classify that information as I bring it into cloud locations. And then more features to come on that. There's a lot. I've seen some of the punch list items. There's a lot of focus around that. And then the Microsoft Cloud App Security, adding that third-party integration story for unlimited number of other third-party cloud applications to manage their identities from a centralized information store. So, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but more than on the Windows piece, but more than ever, right? The idea of Windows 10 as a true client for not only Windows, right, because that's how we think of it in Windows servers, but a true client for Office 365, EMS, and Azure. So taking the ability to take a secure, a secure productive enterprise, taking these features that are cloud developed and having Windows incorporate them in. Like, so one of the first big examples of this is the notion of this integrated data classification system. So, again, in the interest of trying to stay on time, the original presentation, if I took the one before I cut down for this, was literally 90 slides. I don't think anybody wants to see that now. But taking a couple of highlights, just to give you an example of sort of reports, looking at Azure AD, Identity Protection Plan 2 is a notion of, well-rounded reporting around how many users are doing things or have experience at risk, doing full level of assessment of your both logins, where they're coming, types of password hashes, all of these kinds of things will bubble up into, here is your report for users at risk, and you can quickly identify them, share them with other locations, etc. And then again, the capability of taking Azure Information Protection, right, and taking a look at whether that's email-based, file-based, etc., and classifying data and coming up, the ability to, when it's email-based, the ability to coming up and recognizing, the classification of that content, but extending that all the way to, files both stored locally and in the cloud as well. So, before we move on really quickly, Jerry Martin, our cloud strategist and engagement manager, is going to talk a little bit about sort of a package offering that we have around sort of going 10 levels deeper on this with you guys, including the potential of some exciting Microsoft funding to involve with that. But before we kick on, are there any questions from the audience? And then we can always have more questions, of course, at the end. So I'm going to take that as we're going to hold the questions to the end. So Jerry, why don't you go ahead and I'll advance the slide for you and go ahead and talk about our EM plus S workshop.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bob. So everything that Bob just showed you throughout the previous slides, kind of try to summarize a lot of that in a couple of diagrams here, and try to encapsulate it. So the Windows 10 Foundation, the Office 365 suite, and the Enterprise Mobility and Security suite all combined together, building that service and security foundation delivered through the end user experience with Office 365 Pro Plus. From a deployment perspective, it takes a concerted, all-encompassing view to try to utilize and consume all those features and do it in a way that's enterprise class. So we have a very programmatic approach to this workshop that walks through each of these areas and very specifically looks through your environment with a great deal of discovery and identifying feature by feature which ones apply and how they would apply, and how you would deploy those features in order to be able to have the end users enhance their experience, but also secure your environment while you're delivering those feature functions. So we focus on that enterprise level and security. We're very, very intent on driving that identity level security. We focus on areas for conditional access and mobile devices, multi-factor authentication, and then making sure that the data itself, if you will, needs to be able to be protected at all costs. If you're providing access to the entire file cabinet, you want to be able to every once in a while put security around specific files in that cabinet. And so being able to deliver on that type of security with mobile devices, as well as being able to have access to that information through the 365 foundations, is what this workshop's all about. So we walk you through all those pieces as a workshop. It's typically done in a multi-day type of scenario. We'll facilitate on some strategy. We'll walk through each of the pieces, whether it be the 365 suite as well as the mobility and security suite pieces. We focus on those areas with key platform architects within your environment, and we make sure that from an all-up enterprise perspective, sponsors within your organization get a very, very solid, high level, and then if necessary, deeper level view of what all of this creates, which would typically generate an artifact that facilitates a maturity model for your organization to walk through version 1, version 2, version 3 as you start to consume these types of solutions. So it's as Bob mentioned earlier, it's also available for the Microsoft EMS Everywhere funding. So there's opportunity for some additional funding to cover the cost of the workshop as well. Just a quick, short, sweet overview of the workshop, and obviously, as Bob mentioned earlier on, that you already own it alias that allows you guys to contact us if you have questions or want to get a little bit deeper understanding of what an agenda would look like for this stuff. Feel free to reach out to us using that alias, and we'll be happy to engage with you.
So thanks, Jerry. And just to sort of finish up on this topic, so so I know some folks from North Carolina on. We did elements of this in sort of the workshop that we did with you already, but we didn't focus on pieces that at the time you didn't own, right? And so there's a lot of elements in there that would potentially be a focus area for you on a workshop like that if you're considering sort of stepping up here. And then also, and as you know, right, as everyone knows, there's so many ways to sort of handle how we secure your environment, in the cloud platform. So I did a blog post a couple of months back, and I talking about the sort of avoidance of the big red lever, right? And so there definitely are ways that I can just turn things off in Office 365 if I'm afraid they can't work, right? If they're not going to meet our security needs, etc. But also you guys are spending a lot of money on Office 365 to get lots of these great capabilities. I think your end users want them. We all understand what your compliance challenges and data security needs are, right? So how do we help you think through, okay, well, I can protect myself by not allowing them to synchronize to local devices. I can protect myself by enforcing BitLocker. I can protect myself by actually securing the files themselves. I can protect myself by, enabling things like conditional access, right? There are so many different ways that you can protect yourself. It really helps to sort of have this workshop to think through, what are my strategies? Are my strategies going to be that the features and functions are on, but I'm going to layer these tools on top of them to ratchet up the level of security around them so that users can gain access to these things from devices and from other solutions and services, right? Without having to just say no, right? And so that's really what this is all about. I mean, obviously Microsoft recognizes that for them to be long-term successful in Office 365 implementations, we need to secure the environment, right? So this is a huge area of focus. These features and functions are new every day. So if you look on the list of capabilities that come with, SPE 5, for instance, half of them didn't exist 18 months ago, right? So this is an area of significant focus. It's changing every day. So you may think you know what you can get with EM plus S, but just 6 or 8 months ago, there was only one version of EM plus S. Right now, there's 2. Right, and so I highly recommend if you're sort of in this decision-making process somewhere that you kind of go through the workshop. It's a series of sort of topic areas that you can focus the right team on. We can talk through them, kind of understand your circumstances and what you're trying to accomplish and how the technology can map to achieve that, and sort of give you a report of, based on what we heard, this is what we think is the right approach for you, etc. So, again, highly recommend that. So before we totally open up the floor for the office hours piece, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I think I'm required by law at Planet Technologies to talk about. So with all these capabilities, right, there comes an end user learning curve process as well. So I just want to make you aware, without going into the full on commercial for Evolve 365, that Planet has a service that is geared at bridging the gap for your end users around all of these features and functions and how they impact them, right? Because you don't go from sitting at, plan E3 to sitting at plan SPE5 without having a whole bunch of capabilities and features and functions that end users didn't know about before and making sure they're aware of them. So through a combination of a learning portal, the ability to call up an expert help desk on Office products and Office 365 specifically, and then some expert access to a trusted advisor who's an expert in end user, usability and adoptability issues to help guide you through. This is what we think you should do to deliver a proper plan to your end users. I just needed to make sure everybody's aware that it exists. Again, you can email the same alias if you want to get additional information for that. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions. We're pretty much right on time. I'm impressed because it's a lot of content to get through, for you guys to have questions. I know, Ken, you mentioned that you and Charles had a bunch of things going on in your mind around this. Did you have anything in particular you wanted to talk about?
Not specifically, though I want to thank you for finally, once and for all, clearing up what's in and what's out of the E3, the SP, the new package, because it's been very difficult to understand exactly which security products were included, which one weren't. So thank you, and I definitely want a copy of these slides if that's possible.
Absolutely. We'll send them out to everyone that attended. Any other questions around this topic, or, by the way, any other general cloud strategy struggles that you're having, be it Azure, Office 365, possibly CRM Online, any of those as well? We're happy to go for. You have any questions, Roger? I know you wanted to attend this session specifically today, I think. So did you have any questions?
Basically, I'd kind of like to know if SPE would kind of help in protecting us from Microsoft itself, since they seem to insist upon developing new capabilities in the 365 package and turning them on by default. It's where we find out about them when we log into our admin portal and see a message, hey, we turned this on yesterday, and then we scramble to see if it is a compliance issue with us, and then having to go into PowerShell and shut it down or explain it to our end users when it suddenly appears.
Right. So that's an interesting question. So it doesn't in a specific way, right, in a direct way, change that behavior, right? Like, so that's for better or worse, that is the paradigm in the cloud platform world to a certain degree. I totally get the frustration. By the way, one of the things that's a benefit of the You Already Own It program is regular updates with the team, Jerry and I and others, to try and tell you about things that are coming. I can't always tell you what day they're going to show up because some updates are done in a rolling fashion, right? But I can tell you it's on the way and whether you should care about it. And those are things that come from being a You Already Own It customer. But what I can say is if the concern is that new functionality may expose content externally in a way that makes you nervous, the answer is yes, it potentially can have an impact on that, right? So the idea of, enabling more full functioning and featured data classification and information rights management around more sensitive content is definitely an element of what of the pieces and parts, and we'd have to get a little more specific as to whether it's SPE3 or SPE5 needed to deliver what you're looking for, but yes, it certainly can protect you in that way, which is, hey, I may make by accident and lack of understanding, suddenly a new way to share externally. I'll just make up a new function that doesn't exist today, right? And by default, by the way, generally speaking, external sharing is not something that Microsoft ever does enable by default. But let's just say that changed, or it's easily turned on by end user interaction or something like that. It would protect you in that element, because you can say the content itself is protected by another layer, right? So to go back to Jerry's sort of filing cabinet analogy, right? How we used to think about security was, let's take computers completely out of it. How we used to think about data security in an office once upon a time was I had a locked filing cabinet, right? But once I had the key to the filing cabinet, I had access to everything. The fear sometimes in a cloud infrastructure is, if I turn on certain kinds of functionality or features or any of those things, that I'm essentially giving some elements of keys to a much broader audience, right? And what happens if, through accident or on purpose, the really sensitive stuff is secured in cabinet A, but it accidentally gets put in cabinet B, right? Which maybe is not as secure. And lots of people have keys to cabinet B. So if I take something like SPE3 and layer on that additional sort of information security capabilities that I have there, the security stays with the document regardless of where it lives, right? So whether that then gets saved to a local share on somebody else's machine, whether it's shared externally, all of those things, they need to present credentials that are mapped to whatever the security classification of that document is, right? So in a direct sense, no, but in an indirect sense, I think it can at least guard against that sort of data leakage scenario with a bunch of additional capabilities that might make sense. And then secondarily, who's accessing these shares and data analytics around that? So, hey, did you realize you have 4,000, document libraries that have external access turned on, and one of them has got 7,000 hits yesterday? Well, that probably seems like a problem to me. And so that kind of analytics of that environment is a protection as well from that, so that you're aware from that. So hopefully that answered your question as much as I could.
Yes, thank you, Bob. It did.
Okay, great. So
but he brings up a great point though, Bob, and that we're seeing very similar things. I know we're just 2 weeks ago we came in and all of our security compliance filters were gone for e-discovery. We had to rebuild them because Microsoft did a change and they wiped out all of our security compliance filters for e-discovery scope. Luckily, we had copies of how to put them back, but they couldn't put them back for us. We had to rebuild them from scratch. So we need to be protected from our own provider, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and so obviously, so there's different kinds of access, right? So updates to the so number one, and I know you're on the cloud advisory. You guys are on the cloud advisory council, I think. That's information that clearly that's information that needs to be shared. I don't think so. Again, I can't speak. I don't think the expected behavior was it was going to wipe out those scopes, but I can't answer that for sure. I don't. As things constitute today, those are great points, and I think those are exactly the conversations that I know I bring up all the time when I'm on these Cloud Advisory Council meetings, and those of you that are on it should do so as well. I don't know who the representative is from your org, but I'm pretty sure you guys are on those calls. I think Ken.
They were told us they were put on hold.
Okay.
They had enough feedback for now.
Because nobody wants. There's never maybe they got just too many requests and they're queuing them. But there are some channels, and I can certainly help with that. Right. This is a conversation. I think it's important. The topic, of SPE, et cetera, I don't know, directly impacts that, but a constant sharing of information. So supposedly, right, again, there's reality and expected behavior. We're going through that right now with another issue you're having, that I am well aware of, Ken, right, about how it's supposed to work and how it does work sometimes. Supposedly, changes and updates are not supposed to take away those settings without advanced warning, right? I get it that fortunately for you, right, you were able to re-implement them with an inconvenience, but not an extraordinary inconvenience. Because if you hadn't kept those scripts, etc., or the run book for that, it probably would have been a significantly higher inconvenience. That's not supposed to happen, but clearly it did, right? So maybe the feedback is, again, in particular, that I can raise, on behalf of this group in this way is, destructive changes in particular clearly have to be communicated in advance, right? And so if you're unsure about what those behaviors are, if something's going to be destructive or not, then maybe you need additional testings required before they're rolled out, right? I think that's not an unfair request. The only thing that we can do to help you there is to try and regularly communicate in, our You Already Own It sessions. These changes are coming. We feel there's the potential for big enterprise impact on them, and and say, hey, we're expecting a change to the eDiscovery console. If there are things if there are things that you can sort of make sure you have your ducks aligned in a row in case something happens, because we all know, if we flash back to days when we were on premise, right? This upgrade is not supposed to be destructive. Oh, the entire thing blew up in the middle and I have to restore, right? So just being aware of them in advance are one of the benefits of the You Already Own It program, as best as we can, to say, hey, look, there are changes coming. We might want to make sure that you have all of your customizations to the Discovery console. Do you know what would happen if you lost them? Again, fortunately, in this case, you had them, right? But that's providing feedback to Microsoft on this topic and trying to prepare you, because so at Planet we have, and I know some of you folks do too, but it can literally be practically a full-time job to sit and watch changes come to the early adopter tenants. We do have folks at Planet that babysit those tenants constantly, right? And do as much testing as we can in our own environment around and analytics, reach out to our friends in the product teams, et cetera, at Microsoft to try to understand what just happened so that we can advise you at least this change is coming. But we all know there's no such thing as it's coming on this specific day, because many of these updates are rolling across the tenants. And so it's this date range. And then finally, by the way, from a user perspective, which is part of, I think, originally Roger's conversation, the Evolve 365 really tries to address some of that, right? So, I can't promise that every new feature will be available day one in the Evolve portal with videos, but what I can say is we are also babysitting these, early adopter tenants, the beta tenants, and recognizing big user impact moments and having those videos made in advance, or at least as far in advance as we can, because sometimes when they're rolled out, they look slightly different in the production than they do in non-production. But at least get them queued and scheduled so they're available ASAP upon rolling out. So a perfect example of that was Teams. We had videos posted of the production version of Microsoft Teams within 3 days of them being rolled out across the government tenants. So we can help with some of that, but clearly, this is, some of the use cases and some of the incidents, I think there needs to be feedback to Microsoft. Some of those are just the new world reality that you're sort of realigning the way you're interacting with what you're doing with enterprise services to a certain degree. And I know that's a flippant answer, but it's the answer, right? Right?
Yep. So you mentioned Teams in the government tenant. Have you seen Teams being rolled out in the government tenant? Because I know the controls were there, but there was really nothing behind them.
Right. So I have heard rumblings that they're starting to be rolled out from some clients. I have not seen it turn on. So the day they went live in the commercial tenants, we had all of them. We had it available. I've heard some rumblings but I haven't verified any of those. But I heard from a few folks, somebody said, oh, I got a customer that's seen Teams. but I haven't been able to connect with the customer to find out whether they've shown. They were small, so typically they hit big batches of small tenants first, and go to some of the larger tenants second, third, fourth, and eighth. But so I've heard rumblings. I expect it soon. I know what your problem with groups and teams will be. And we can, again, we're available potentially, Ken, to try to help you think through that, right?
Appreciate it.
Any other questions just in general, right? This is an open forum to talk about anything anybody's having concerns about around Azure, Office 365, et cetera, that we want to have conversation about.
Can you, when do you think your timeline is to send out the presentation? Because I'd like that this afternoon, if that's possible.
I'll hang up and send it directly to you, Ken.
Awesome, thank you.
Contact info. So as soon as we're done, I'll send that to you.
Thank you so much.
Do you want it as well, Roger? Because I have your contact info.
Yeah, that would be great, Bob.
Okay. Any other questions from you?
Not at this time. It was a great presentation, and answered quite a few of my, like Ken, what are the true differences between 5 and 3? So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if like in a summary to come away with that, right? The big ones on the O365 piece, right? Those are Delve Analytics and Power BI, right? So sort of the analytics piece, there's a good amount more there, and then it also brings all the voice integration, right? So those are the big gets there, right? On the security side, it's sort of that next level stuff around information protection and its integration with Windows, and that capability also extends to Windows, which you actually get an potential of an upgraded version of Windows Client as well comes with it. And so I can carry that experience across the enterprise, whether I'm in the cloud, on-premise, file shares, all of that stuff, right? And then there's also some on-premise capabilities for hybrid environments that I didn't get into because I think it can be confusing without a further conversation. But if I am an SPE 5 customer, I have unlimited on-premise servers that map to my cloud infrastructure ownership as well, right? So if I am a large enterprise and I need to have an on-premise SharePoint environment as well, all of those servers are covered under SPE 5 if all of my users are licensed for them, right? So that's actually a big change. So that's something else that I didn't really get into on this presentation because I think sometimes it's confusing. But if you have questions about that, hit me up on that. I'm happy to shoot it to the alias that goes to Jerry and I both. That way, if I'm traveling, Jerry can potentially answer those. And then, like I said, some of the advanced analytics and advanced security metrics around advanced threat analytics. There's a whole layer of extra capabilities. The biggest difference is this concept of sort of additional role, understanding not only your identity and what's happening from a security perspective, but either layering on conditions or taking additional reporting or actions based on what level of access you have to the environment, right? I'm less concerned if there's a minor inconsistency on a user than I am if there's a minor inconsistency on an admin, right? And so those capabilities come to bear as well in 5. So those are the big pieces. So any other? Alrighty then. So with that, I will call it a wrap. Again, if you have any further follow-ups, whatever, I will send them to the alias. You already own it at go-planet.com. I will send out the presentation to both Ken and Roger as soon as I hang up. And everybody have a great day. Thanks for joining us this month.